So in today's video, we're going to look at how to move a row based on a selection to the top of another tab. So for example, it would move this row down and add it right here at the top. So let's go ahead and jump into the script. So we'll go to extensions and app script. And then once this is loaded, we'll go ahead and just call this script. And then what we're going to do is use what's called an onEdit function, which just watches the edits you make. And then we're going to determine based on, is it on this tab? Is it in this column? And do we select this status? And if so, then we'll move this row over to the top of here. So let's go ahead and build that out. So we're going to use just the native onEdit function. We will have to authorize this before it's going to work. And so let's go ahead and start off by getting the event object. So this E in here is going to grab some data about what's going on. So for example, the very things we need, like what sheet was edited, what range was edited, and that's what gives us the column and the row, and then we can determine the value and determine if we want to move that. So let's go ahead and get that from our E. And so we can get the range, and we'll do E.range just like that. And then from that, we can get the column and the row. And we can also get the value. And then we can also get the source sheet, which is what sheet was edited. And so this is not going to be under range. This is going to be under source. And then we can do get active sheet, just like that. And so then what we can do, let me make sure I add my equals here, is do an if statement to determine if we want to move the row. And so we're going to do, first of all, the source, and then we're going to do a get name on that and determine, is this equal to leads? And so if you notice, there's a single equals here, and this is called an assignment. And so what that does is we're calling a variable here, right? We're declaring it range, and then we're assigning this value to it. So now, whenever we use range from now on, it's going to be equal to what was here, which is why we can then do range.getColumn, because we could do basically e.range.getColumn. And so the same thing with source, we're doing e and source.getActiveSheet. Now, when we do two equals, it's a comparative. So instead of assigning, it's not changing the name to leads. It's saying, is it leads? And if so, it's going to be true. And then an if statement only runs if everything in here is true. And what we'll do is these curly braces, and then anything inside here will run as long as it's all true. So you can do more than one thing. So you can do two ampersands, and that is and. So in other words, this and that have to be true. Or you could do pipe symbols, and that means this or that can be true. And then you can use parentheses within to combine if or and in a more complicated way. But we're just going to do a couple ands here. So if the name is leads, so this sheet, and we want to do column 1, and the status is equal to move to prospects. So column is equal to 1, and val is equal to move to prospects. So we've met all our conditions, and so we can continue on our merry way. Now, for the sake of making this easier to write, we could pull from this source, but the autocomplete works better if we actually declare the spreadsheet app and get active spreadsheet. And so then we could do our source sheet like this. And so maybe we could just do sheet and get sheet by name, and we could do leads, and then we could do our target would be get sheet by name, and this will be prospects. So based on this, now we can do the rest of our logic. So let's start with just moving the row. And then I'm going to show you how to do some things like if you have a smart chip, for example, and how you can move that. And then what if you want to add something like a date? So we'll run through that. But first of all, let's just look at how to move it to the top of this tab. So what we're going to do is target insert row above or before here, sorry. And then the before position will be this row here. So if you happen to have more rows above, so something like this, then it'd be before row 4. But if you just have a table like this, then it'd be above row 2 or before row 2. So insert row before. And now we need to get that data. And so we're going to do let data equals to sheet get range. And then here we have a couple different options. So we have the row, and then we determine what column. So if you look at this, in this one we have a status here and we don't have it here. So if you want the status on both, then you could just start in column 1 and continue your merry way. But in this case, we're going to start in column 2 because we only want to grab this data and move it over. So if you wanted to get the whole thing, just start with 1, otherwise you can do 2. And the next thing would be the number of rows, and then finally the number of columns. So we could count these manually, and so in this case, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or, and so that would look like this, or you could do sheet get last column, and then here we do -1. Now the only goofy thing would be if you have other columns here that aren't related to this table, in which case you may want to do this manually and count it manually. But in this case, since this is the only thing on this tab, then you could do it like that. All right, so finally, we're going to do get values, just like that. And then we can do target, get range, and then we're going to do row 2, column 1. The number of rows would be 1, and the number of columns. And again, we could set this manually. So we could do our count, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we could add that here, just like that. Or we could get it automatically from data. And then we got to do that 0 to get to the correct row. And then we can do set values and data just like that. All right, so let me get rid of a little of this extra here. And then we need to authorize the script now. And so I'm going to do one more thing real quick here just to make the authorization a little easier. And so if you're doing this, I definitely recommend, unless you're going to access other spreadsheets. And so in that case, you would need to get rid of this, or you're going to have some weird errors if you're trying to access another Google Sheet. So let's go ahead and run, and we're going to authorize this. So review permissions, select your Google account. And then here, it's just telling you about the access to this Google Sheet. So click continue. And then this error is just because we're running it in the script editor. But now if we go to the Google Sheet, it's going to run automatically. So let's go ahead and check it out. So I've not added a deleting of the original. So right now it's just going to copy it to it. So let's go ahead and just check this one, move to prospects. So what we're expecting to happen is a new row added, and it happened just like that. Let's go ahead and delete this row and check it again. And then let's go check, and perfect. There it got moved. All right, so that's the first part of the functionality. Now let's move on to something else. So I mentioned about doing the smart chips. So let's go ahead and convert this to a chip and try this move to again. So if we click move to, come over here, and you can see that chip didn't translate. It just converted it to the text. So this is not ideal if you have smart chips or other things that aren't moving. And so let's look at how to address that. And then we'll wrap up with what happens if you want to add something like maybe a date that it got moved in a new column. So let's go back to our script here. So let's go ahead and convert all these, I think, to chips. All right, and so let's jump back into the script here, and let's take some of this data. So this is all fine, but let's take this, and we're just going to comment it out. And so the way you do that, / asterisk, and then come down at the end of this, and asterisk and /. And so you can see now these turn back to the same color. And so it's kind of like what we did here. This is basically a comment. So now what we're going to do is, instead of this where we're getting values, setting values, we're actually going to copy the data. And so if we go sheet, get range, and then we can do the same thing here. So let's get this. And then we're going to do copy to instead. And if we look here, we're basically doing a destination. And so if you look in this little code here, copy to, and then we have sheet, get range. And then it tells you, you only need the top left cell position. So in other words, if we've created a new row here, all we need to do is point to this cell. So let's go ahead and delete these real quick. And then if we come back here, we have our target. So we're going to do target, get range, and then we could do A2, or we could do our row 2 and column 1. Either one is fine. So at this point, again, we still have not deleted the row. And by the way we delete the original would be sheet, delete row, and row. I'm going to comment this out just for a moment, just so we're not having to deal with deleting data and moving back and forth. So this is how you comment out a single row, is just to put 2 forward slashes in front of it, and then this won't run. Now, if you want to activate it, just delete those 2 forward slashes and you can see the color changes. And before we go and test this, I just realized something. This row isn't what we want. We actually want 2. So I said A2, and then this needs to be 2, 1. And that's going to be this row 2 and column 1. All right, so everything should be good to go now. Make sure we save this before we go run again, and then come over here and let's test this out. So move to prospects, go to prospects, and there it is. Now our smart chip is working. All right, so let's go ahead and activate this delete row. And then I'm going to do one more thing here is let's go ahead on this one, add a new column. So we could add it at the end. We could add at the beginning. Either one is fine. Let's do it at the end right now. And so we'll do date moved. And then if we come back over here, so we could do it on the copy to like this, but either way, let's do it like this. So we'll do let today. So first of all, I'll come up with this date, and I'm going to put it in a utilities format date wrapper, and then basically I'm going to come up with a new date. So you could do something like this. You could just do let today equal new date and then run with it from there. But I'm going to put utilities format date just so it's a more friendly format. Otherwise, it's going to look like a long string and it's going to have time zone, all that kind of stuff. So then we're going to do our time zone. So we have date, time zone, and format. So time zone, let's just grab it from the spreadsheet. So we have the spreadsheet right here. So we can do ss.get spreadsheet time zone. And then for the format, we can pick, let's do month, day, and year, just like that. And then finally, let's do target, get range, and then we're going to do that same row 2. And then let's pick the column. So in this case, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so we'll just add it there and do set value and do today. The one thing you'll notice is like in the original one, we're doing values because we're doing multiple cells. This one, we're just doing one. And so we're doing set value instead of values. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. Make sure we save it. And so now what's going to happen is it is going to copy it with that smart chip, and then we're going to add that today date timestamp on this side. So let's go ahead and check that out. So let's go ahead and just move this one. So this one should delete. There you go. It's gone. If we come over here, they're at the top. There's the smart chip, and there's the date moved. And so if you wanted to add it at the beginning, you could just insert new row here. And then what you'd have to do is this one, instead of adding column 1, you'd want to add in column 2. And this one, instead of column 6, you'd want to add in column 1. So that's how you would adjust if you wanted that date at the beginning in column A instead of at the end. All right, so that is it for today's video on how to move a row to the top of another tab in Google Sheets. Make sure to check out the other videos on our channel for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.